They didn't ask. They just decided. And like always, I was expected to smile and make it work. My name is Ava Mitchell. I'm 29 years old and a graphic designer at a small interior design firm in Seattle called Lux Interiors. It's the kind of place where no one outside the city would know the name. But I'm proud of the work I do. I live in a tiny apartment on Capitol Hill, the neighborhood that hums with coffee shops and art galleries, a place I carved out for myself. One paycheck at a time. I built my life piece by piece, my degree, my credit score, my secondhand couch I saved up for. Nothing was handed to me. I learned early on that no one would give me a safety net. So I became my own, my family. Though, never saw it that way. They've always said I'm lucky. Lucky to have a good job. Lucky to be stable. They see me as a resource, not a daughter. My parents, Helen and Mark, have always believed family means giving without question. And for them, that mostly meant me giving. And Lily me, little sister, taking. Lily is 2 years younger than me, but somehow always seems like she's stuck at 16. She bounces from job to job, apartment to apartment, blaming everyone else for her stumbles. When she loses a job, it's because her boss was a tyrant. When she can't pay rent, it's because her roommates were jealous. Every time. She lands on her feet, my feet. Mom and Dad never question it. They just turn to me. You're the steady one. Ava, you can help. That was the phrase I grew up with. You're the lucky one. You're the strong one. You'll figure it out. And for years, I believed them. I believed that being loved meant being needed. That saying no would make me heartless. But love isn't a transaction. And being strong doesn't mean being a doormat. I didn't realize that until much later. But before I continue my story, let me ask you this. Where are you watching from? What time is it for you right now? Leave a comment below, I'd love to know. Growing up, I learned to keep the peace. My parents said it was a blessing to be the one everyone could rely on. So I did. I picked up the pieces whenever Lily's world fell apart. I sent money when her rent was overdue. I co-signed loans when she couldn't get approved. I covered her half of the groceries when she moved back in with Mom and Dad again. Each time, it felt like a small price to pay for family. A silent agreement that said, this is how we love each other. Except it never felt like love to me. It felt like debt. Lily had a way of making her problems sound like they belonged to everyone else. She'd call, crying about how hard life was, how she was trying so hard, and I believed her, because I wanted to believe that if I gave enough, she'd finally stand on her own. But Lily never changed. She got older, but she didn't grow up. And my parents, they saw that as my responsibility to fix. You're the older sister. Mom would say, she needs you. It was like they couldn't see how tired I was. How many times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no. How my bank account wasn't the only thing draining I was too. Sunday dinner was always the same at my parents' house. Same casserole recipe Mom had been making since I was a kid. Same table that creaked in the middle. Same dance of polite conversation and unspoken expectations. That evening, I knew something was off the moment I walked in. Mom's smile was too tight. Dad's handshake was too distracted. And Lily was already there, staring at her phone, barely looking up when I walked through the door. We sat down to eat. Mom asked about the weather like it was an achievement. Dad kept refilling his glass. Eyes on the tablecloth instead of on us. Lily pushed food around her plate, never meeting my eyes. I could feel it, the weight of a conversation they'd already had without me. I'd seen it enough times to recognize the pattern. And sure enough, halfway through dinner, Mom put down her fork and folded her hands neatly in front of her. "Ava," she said in that soft voice she reserved for requests I wouldn't like. "We've been talking, and Lily's had a really rough time lately. We thought it would be best for her to move in with you for a little while, just until she gets back on her feet." She said it like she was offering me a cup of tea. Like of course I'd say yes. My dad let out a breath he'd been holding, already bracing for me to argue, but Lily just sat there, silent, a flicker of something smug in her eyes. For a moment, I looked at all of them, at the quiet relief on my father's face, at the practiced calm on my mother's, at Lily's half-smile, the way she didn't even bother to pretend this was hard for her. I saw at Alan, I decided. I smiled. "Of course," I said lightly. "If it helps Lily get back on her feet, I don't see why not." The silence that followed was sharp enough to taste. Mom blinked, clearly thrown off. Dad's shoulders dropped, and he actually smiled for the first time all night. Lily leaned back in her chair like she'd just won something. No one noticed how still I went after that. How quiet I was. They thought I'd caved, that I was the same Ava who always cleaned up their messes. But what they didn't know, what no one bothered to ask, was that I hadn't lived in that apartment for weeks. And I had no intention of letting Lily move into a place that didn't exist anymore. I didn't move out of that apartment overnight. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision or a burst of anger. It was something that grew in the quiet spaces of my mind over months of pretending everything was fine. When I was 21, Lily called me sobbing because her car had been repossessed. She said she couldn't get to her new job without it, that this time was different. So I co-signed a loan for her. She stopped showing up to that job 3 weeks later. And when the bills piled up, they came for me. At 23, Mom called me in tears because the mortgage was overdue. Dad had been laid off. Lily had moved back in, and there was no one else to turn to. I wired Zwei. 000 the next morning. No one said thank you. That Christmas, Mom gave me a coffee mug that said "World's Best Daughter," and I almost laughed. At 25, Lily got her first DUI, at least the first one anyone knew about. Dad asked me to keep it quiet, to protect the family's reputation. I paid for the lawyer. Lily never said a word of thanks. The next year, she got pulled over again. That time, I refused to help. Mom called me cold. She said I'd never understand what it meant to worry about someone you loved. That Aaron's Lefeno. That Lily's life was harder than mine. That night, I realized something. They didn't see me. They saw a safety net. They saw a faucet they could turn on when things fell apart. And I didn't want to be that anymore. So I started pulling back. Polite décline. Excuses about being busy. Shifting conversations away from money and help. And I watched as the disappointment turned to anger. How my family had always said we're in this together but only meant it when I was paying the bills. One night, sitting alone in my tiny apartment, I realized I didn't feel safe there anymore. It wasn't Monet, was a landing pad for everyone else's emergencies. So I called a realtor. Sold the place quietly. No big announcement. No drama. I moved into a smaller rental in Capitol Hill. One no one knew about. It wasn't fancy. But it was mine. No one asked where I'd moved. And I didn't offer it. Because after years of giving everything, the only thing I had left was my peace. And I wasn't about to share that with people who never asked what I needed. The text started the following Monday. Mom sent me a cheerful message. We're bringing Lily's mattress on Saturday. Dad's loading boxes Friday night. She didn't ask if I was ready. She didn't even ask if I still lived there. I didn't reply. They didn't seem to notice. By Thursday, the messages turned into reminders. Let us know if you want help cleaning before Lily gets there. Mom said. She's excited to finally have her own space. That one made me pause. Coffee cup halfway to my lips. Lily had never washed a dish in her own apartment. I let out a small laugh, bitter. Tired. I didn't correct them. I didn't push back. I just let it all play out. Because they were talking to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. And I was done trying to be her. Saturday morning came. I left early. Coffee first. Then a long walk through the farmer's market at Pike Place. I wandered past stands of fresh flowers. Honey jars glinting in the early sun. I didn't buy anything. I just stood there, breathing in the warm yeast smell of fresh bread, feeling the weight of a choice I'd already made. My phone vibrated in my pocket again and again, calls, voicemails, texts. I let them all go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear it. I knew how this part of the story always went. When I finally looked at my phone, there were 5 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad. I read one text from Mom. Her words sharp and panicked. There's someone here. Some man. He says he lives there. He says you don't live here anymore. I let the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it, the unfamiliarity of this new world where I didn't owe them an explanation. You didn't tell us, she said when I finally picked up. Her voice was brittle. You never said a word. No, I said calmly. I didn't. I could hear the background sounds of bags rustling, of Dad's voice low and frustrated, of Lily's voice pitched higher than usual. What is this? Ava, Mom snapped. We're standing here with all her things. What are we supposed to do? I let my breath out slow. Figure it out, I said softly, just like I had to. For a second, no one said anything. Then Dad's voice cut in. Sharper now. You lied to us. You said she could move in. I said, if it helps Lily get back on her feet. I don't see why not. I replied, that was at the old place. And if you remember, I don't live there anymore. There was a pause then, an exhale that sounded like a punch to the gut. Lily's voice rose. Angry now. This is petty. Ava, you're my sister. How could you do this? You tilted my head, though she couldn't see me. You packed up your life and drove across the city to move into an apartment you didn't even confirm still existed. I said, that's not cruelty. That's entitlement. They thought that was the end of it. They were wrong. By that evening, they showed up at my new apartment. I knew they would. Mom had always been the type to prove a point. No matter how far she had to reach. I watched them from behind the peephole. Helen, Mark, and Lily, standing on the front step with a trunk full of boxes parked at the curb like it was moving day. The knock on the door was sharp. 3 short raps that tried to sound polite but couldn't hide the anger underneath. I opened it halfway. You found me, I said flatly. Mom's lipstick was smudged. Hair pushed back like she'd been running her hands through it all day. We tried calling, she said, her voice tight. We didn't think you'd be here. It's my apartment, I said simply. Dad's voice was rising now, raw with frustration. You said she could move in. We're here nowhere. You really going to turn your sister away? I didn't move. My voice stayed low. I never said she could move in here. I said, if it helps Lily get back on her feet. I don't see why not. That was the old place. And I don't live there anymore. Lily stepped forward. Her arms crossed tight. Her cheeks were red not from embarrassment, but from fury. "You always act like you're so much better than everyone." She spat. "But this is just cruel." I shook my head slowly. "No. Lily, this is the first honest thing I've done in years." Dad cut in again. "We're not leaving. Ava, we're family. We've put up with so much from you." I didn't let him finish. I picked up my phone. Dialing. "What are you doing?" Mom demanded. I didn't answer. When the dispatcher answered, my voice was calm. "Yes. I have family members outside my apartment who are refusing to leave. They're not on the lease. They weren't invited. I'd like to report trespassing." Lai's mouth fell open. Mom looked like I'd slapped her. "You're calling the police on your own family." She whispered. "I asked you to leave." I said, "You didn't." The officer arrived 10 minutes later, a woman with a calm face and a steady voice. "Evening," she said. "We received a call about trespassing." I nodded. "That's me." She turned to my parents. Her expression firm but polite. "Ma'am, Seer, you're not on the lease here. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Lily looked like she might cry or scream. "You're going to regret this." "Ava," she hissed. I didn't flinch. "No," I said. "I've regretted almost everything up until now. This is the first thing I'm sure of." The next day, I woke up to 12, missed calls, 5 from Mom, 2 from Dad, and the rest from numbers I didn't recognize. Cousins, family, friends, maybe even the neighbors. I didn't answer any of them. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of a silence I hadn't felt in years. I scrolled through my messages. Mom had posted on Facebook 3 paragraphs of heartbreak emojis and a photo of Lily as a toddler. Wide-eyed and innocent, we raised our daughters to care for each other. She wrote, "But one of them has forgotten what that means." Hundreds of likes. Dozens of comments from people I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Calling me cold. Selfish. Ungrateful. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then opened my photo app. I took screenshots of everything. The $2. Oh, 0. I'd wired to cover their mortgage. My name on Lily's car loan, alongside the collection notice. The lawyer's invoice from her DUI case. A message from Lily 2 years ago, calling me a boring robot because I wouldn't let her crash at my place for a month. I posted them back. No hashtags. No dramatic captions. Just one line at the end. I didn't abandon my family. I just stopped volunteering for emotional debt. Then I turned off my phone. Not because I was afraid, because I didn't need to keep proving myself to people who never asked how I was doing. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was performing. I didn't feel like I had to be the good daughter. The steady one. The quiet hero in the background. I sat on my small balcony. The cold air on my face. Below me, the city was still humming along, cars passing. Someone walking a dog in a puffy jacket. Headlights glowing in the dusk. A neighbor 2 floors down saw me and raised a hand in greeting. I raised mine back. It was a small gesture, but it felt more real than anything I'd done for my family in years. Inside, the apartment was quiet. No framed photos of family on the walls. No voices telling me what I owed. Just the low hum of the fridge. The soft creak of old pipes. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window, wrapping my hands around the warmth. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel bitter. I just felt done. Done explaining. Done apologizing. Done letting someone else decide what family meant. And in that stillness, I realized something. I hadn't vanished. I'd just stopped opening my door to people who never knocked to see how I was holding up. That was enough. This was my story not about anger or revenge, but about drawing a line. A story about how sometimes the only way to love yourself is to stop proving your worth to people who can't see it. I know I'm not alone. So many of us have been told that family means endless giving, endless sacrifice. But family isn't a debt. Family is trust. Family is carry on both sides. If you're watching this and you've felt the weight of expectations that were never yours to carry, I hope you know you're not selfish for saying no. You're not ungrateful for wanting peace. Let me know in the comments, have you ever felt like you were only as good as what you could give? Have you had to set boundaries that no one understood? I'd love to hear your story. Thank you for watching and for letting me share mine. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it too. And remember, you are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to walk away from what no longer feels like home.